up, everybody, man? It's your boy Rillo. Look, man, we back again with the Black Lunch Break, man. I'm here with my girl Sika, so you already know what it is, man. The same time, same place, man, but with the usual suspects. But look, we back again with our homie Andre Gaines, producer, executive producer of the up and coming hit docu series Lady Nadell, which is about a transgender woman back in the day who was really an avant-gardist in her own right. And so we sit down with him and talk about his journey and the release of his new work that's coming out this Sunday on HBO Max, man. So Sika, I'm looking forward to getting into this conversation with this brother. I know it's gonna be dynamic, and so yeah, it's gonna be dope.
What comes to mind when you hear the words "Black with no chaser"?
Black with no chaser. What comes to mind is that you're going to give it to people straight, and sometimes it might burn going down, but at the end of the day, it's probably better for you that way.
I mean, yeah, the purity is what we need sometimes, right? So
That's
we
right.
don't have to dodge the
Especially now, all day long,
yes.
you're dealing with walking on eggshells, trying to make sure you're politically correct and doing all the right things. And for Christ's sake, sometimes people just need the damn truth.
That's funny that you
Absolutely.
say politically correct, because we absolutely love that we not pressure anyone to come on our platform feeling the need to have double consciousness. You could just be yourself. Whatever comes
Right.
out, it comes out. We respect it because it's part of our culture. So it is what it is, and we love
Yeah.
who we are.
Yeah, no, and I like the nod
That-
to double consciousness. A lot of people haven't read Souls of Black Folk, so a lot of people don't know what the
Right.
hell you're talking about, but that's exactly the point.
Come on now.
That was one of
You
the
know
that was
what I
one of the
mean?
first books I read when I was in college, was Souls of Black Folks, and then W.B. Du Bois, and then really in, I think, senior year of high school, I read a book by George James called Stolen Legacy, about how the West essentially took the legacy of the Egyptians and adopted it as their own. And so yeah, that's kind of part of it, and especially in my line of work, where we're oftentimes have to ride the line. Thankfully, a lot of the tide has turned in the direction of diversity, equity, inclusion, and kind of all of these trigger words. But prior to having a moniker or some type of identifying name to go along with what people should be doing, which is just called doing the right thing, oftentimes you're have to have a burden on your shoulders to kind of carry that.
Absolutely.
this Cirillo. We keep having the same kind of conversations, right? Me and you just discussed. How come
Yeah.
we can't call films films? Not saying that it's not important to place the word black in front of it, but sometimes like we can distract people from it by placing it, and sometimes we need the respect of a filmmaker outside of the terms of black film. Like,
Right.
I'm making films. Everybody is into films, and sometimes it's a distraction more so than it is an inclusion thing. But I love that you brought
Mhm.
up the fact of diversity and inclusion. So how have you managed that with your career, especially building cinematic studios and everything?
Yeah, so I mean, my career is a really interesting one. I mean, it's I don't think anyone's career necessarily has, like, everybody has a target, but you don't necessarily shoot directly for that target. Sometimes you kind of go in these different ways. And so I actually started Cinemation as an animation visual effects company years ago when I graduated NYU, and went to film school there, and then started to develop it, and ended up getting heavily into film finance and starting to finance some of these pictures. And really, I think a example of the inclusion writer when it comes to trying to deliver content to people is the show I have on right now, which is The Lady and the Dale. That's on HBO and HBO Max. And the last episode will be airing on this coming Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. Pacific time. But a lot of people are surprised to see it was a black producer that's behind this story about a
Wow.
transgender woman in the 1970s who built a car that was going to save solve the gas crisis and all of these types of things. And I
Why do you
just
think
like
people are
telling
shocked
great stories.
that that is a
What'd you
black
say?
producer? Why do you think
Yeah.
people are shocked?
Well, I think probably because, like you said, there's the way that our lives work, not just the industry, is through labels. There's a requirement, I think, just for our brains to operate, for the human brain to operate, to categorize and compartmentalize things. So if
Mm.
we see black producers, the assumption is you're just going to be making black content, or movies or TV shows that have black characters in them. That's important to me to be able to see myself in the characters that I produce movies or television series out of. But black people watch The Crown too. We watch Game of Thrones, we watch Walking Dead, we watch Queen's Gambit, just kind of a whole series of different shows and content that's out there. It's like, how could you not absorb all of it? And we're certainly not monolithic in the way that we think and operate. I'm a believer that some of that might actually be to our detriment. But I do believe when it comes to telling stories, the idea is really to tell a great story. That's, really first and foremost. And when this project came to me, there was really no way that I could have ever turned it down. It was just extraordinary.
I wanna stay there for a second because I think that a lot of folks may not know exactly what you mean, like to our detriment. Because sometimes, and I think I know what you're getting at when you say like to our detriment, which is but I don't want to put words in your mouth. So I just really want to kind of elaborate on that for a minute about when you say to our detriment, because I have my thoughts about it, and
Yeah, right,
but I
right.
would love to get yours though, because I think it's interesting bringing that part up, because I think it's an important piece
Hmm.
of round out the conversation on diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, no, it's interesting thing because the just sort of the nature of being a Black American. I mean, a born and raised Black American. You go any place around the country. I've lived everywhere, around the world. I lived in Africa between ages 14 and 15, which was a huge eye opener, and lived in Spain, lived in kind of all over the place. And when you look at tribes and groups of people, there's a collective consciousness that they have that we as Black folks in America, we have the same collective consciousness, but we like to try to tell people how different we are within our own culture. And being monolithic when it comes to a voting block, that's a very powerful thing. Being monolithic when it comes to boycotting certain businesses that don't include us as part of their conversation, don't have Black members on their boards, don't have stores in the Black community, banding together and having the same mindset and moving forward on the same trajectory and with the same thought process, can change things. The moment that we're in right now, Black Lives Matter was around for a long time, and it really wasn't until uh, you know George Floyd ended up dying that the use of that term Black Lives Matter was sort of universally and globally accepted. I mean, when Black Lives Matter really first launched, there was a lot of pushback of people saying, well, that's probably not the best name for an organization to just say Black Lives Matter like that. It's like, well, the NAACP is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. I mean, what's really the difference? You know what I mean? It's like, what's the difference between saying one thing or the other? I mean, you got to really just say
Yes.
it and kind of point it out. But the moment that we're in right now, I feel, is as a result of all of those brothers and sisters getting out onto the streets and marching and having the same thought and being monolithic in the way that we approached how to change government policies and rules and policing and things like this. And you just see this whole wave of change that's happening. We could benefit a lot from trying to maintain that same level of groupthink that in some cases is a detriment, but in many, many cases, when it comes to trying to change laws, trying to change policy, trying to change things like that, can have a huge, huge beneficial effect. So that's
Absolutely.
what I meant by that, you know.
No, absolutely, yeah. I think that, like, there's times in which we can mobilize together, but I think that as a people, we are very, very astute and can walk into both of them at the same time. And
Yeah,
so
right.
I think it's just like being able to understand, like, it's almost like picking your battles, right? Like, okay, like we got energy around this, let's get this one across to the finish line. And I think some of what you're saying is that we'll be getting things almost approaching the finish line, but then because we will get distracted because we are people that are not monolithic, and because of that, I think that sometimes that can be we like, because I think that sometimes we get to the finish line, people are like, hold on now, don't forget about us over here. We don't want to do the same
Yeah.
thing to our people that we are trying to fight against. And so I think that we're still trying to find ways in which to ensure that even folks that are pushed farther in the margins, even in our own spaces, in our own communities, still have an opportunity, which I think brings us full circle to Lady in Adele, which is about transgender people and living in the margins, even within their own communities, and trying to find a voice. And so I just want to kind of bring the conversation full circle so we can have
Yeah,
this
no,
good
I
moment right
appreciate
here.
that. I mean, I think the interesting thing about I mean, we could talk about the other topic for 100 years, but
Oh, for sure.
but the interesting thing about the Lady in the Dale is, really we were telling the story that occurred like a capsule in time of transgender history. And just like so many different circumstances, Black Americans are at the forefront of many of these movements, and including the transgender movement, which wasn't recognized that far back. But I mean, even as far back as Reconstruction in the late 1860s, there was a transgender woman named Frances Thompson who was really used as a tool from the Confederate army and government to say, well, this is what happens when we free slaves. This is the kind of go off the rails, and they end up becoming transgender. But that's one of the first indications or first moments in history in which we actually hear the word transgender or transsexual at the time. And so with Lady in the Dale, the central figure is this woman named Elizabeth Carmichael, who had started a car company back in the 1970s, 20th Century Motor Car Corporation, and she built a three-wheel car called the Dale. It was this yellow space-age three-wheel car that was going to go 70 miles to the gallon. And during the 1970s, which I wasn't born yet, but at the time there was this huge gas shortage. And when I tell people about it, I equate it to making a run on the grocery store during the pandemic when you thought everybody was going to go buy toilet paper or something like that, and you're going to not have anything. Well, the same thing was happening with gas, that people were making a run on gas stations because there was an embargo on oil coming into the United States from the Middle Eastern countries. And that created this shortage of gasoline at every pump. So you just saw lines and lines of cars going down the street that people were waiting to get gasoline. And here comes this bold, brash woman who had a incredible past and was about to build for herself this awesome future, and builds this car that's going to go 70 miles to the gallon. I mean, imagine if cars went 70 miles to the gallon in the 1970s.
For
Like,
real.
well, how far would our SUVs be going right now? It's like you're lucky to get 28 miles, 30 miles or something out of
Seriously.
these gas guzzlers. So it's like, if that actually happened, like, imagine what that might look like. So the big three automakers, which are GM, Chrysler, Ford, really are the major ones that dominate even to this day. And they, there's a belief that they really brought her to her knees. I mean, she was one of many examples of independent car makers that were trying to make a car and get it to the marketplace in a world that was dominated by these large, multinational corporate conglomerates.
Right.
And really, to this day, the only one that's managed to break through is Tesla. Elon Musk is, and he did it at the behest of many of these car manufacturers to say that, listen, we're not even going to have dealers. We're not going to have dealerships. We're just going to sell our cars. We're going to make our cars and we're going to sell them directly to people. And Liz Carmichael was really doing the same. And the problem was that she was doing it far ahead of her time. And, the government used that against her. There's SEC laws and securities and exchange laws when it comes to selling people products before they're actually made. Nowadays, we do that on a regular basis. You go on Kickstarter, or something like that. You go and buy somebody's,
Easy.
T-shirt or shoes or something like that, and they haven't made it yet, but you paid full price for it. But back then, those, there were rules against that, and you could get brought down, which is what happened to her.
And that's tough. It reminds me I feel like every industry always has that. I remember once upon a time, in baseball, the Curt Flood rule came about because Curt Flood couldn't be traded. And although Curt Flood never really he was bogged down in the monopolizing of players, right? And being able to retain a player in perpetuity. But because of his bravery and because of, courage and characters, and people that came through like in Lady in the Dale, I feel like, you always got people out that are on an avant-gardist level where, sometimes it's hard to kind of normalize something because people aren't just ready for it. It brings it a conversation of Earth Gang. Earth Gang, my boy was a road manager with them at the time in VA. It was all going to Hampton. And I remember when he was trying to push him to become more pop or become more like what the time was looking for. And Earth Gang told him, politely, look, bruh, I hear you. But it's not that we are, past our time. We just haven't, our time has come yet. The time need to catch up to us. And what you're saying in so many words is that, look, man, sometimes you got to keep on doing a thing because people don't realize that they just not ready for the thing yet. When you're the first and come out there and you got all these major industries, that are really trying to suppress you, because if you come in and you're creating you be trying to be a new category king. I just read this book called Play Bigger. And Play Bigger talked about becoming the category king, so to speak. And when you come with new ideas, people think that people automatically come in a way to disrupt. But disruption is a byproduct of somebody has an idea that is in a category in itself and is just different. And they know that if they let that category come in. But the thing is that you got to normalize that category. And I think essentially what you're saying is normalization of different categories and allowing to breathe life into those categories, but it takes time. And usually it takes 6 to 10 years, according to data, is that it takes 6 to 10 years to normalize an idea.
That's probably true. Yeah.
And so
that's probably true. I could agree with that.
Well, I think that's a great question.
Interesting.
That's a great way to move into this question. So, as an African American creative in Hollywood, how long did it take you to establish your footing in Hollywood in itself?
I mean, that's easily 6 to 10 years process itself. I mean, it's true. I mean, as a matter of fact, it's funny that you say that, because when I had the great fortune of being surrounded by some incredible mentors and supporters from the beginning. That I'll say is not something that everyone is blessed with from the start. And it started really with my parents, who taught me everything I know about money, and really moved on when it came to producers telling me about the industry and really learning that type of thing. Because in so having that, one of the things that they said, it's going to take a decade. It's going to take you 10 years to really get the sort of holy grail that you're trying to accomplish. And even then, you know, the work continues and it never really stops. But yeah, that's a fair assessment, a 5 to 10 year timetable. And in some cases you can get lucky and kind of hit it early. But you know, I think that that's a fair assessment for any education, uh, to
Yes.
really learn something. I mean, we only go to school, you know, to college for 4 years, maybe go to grad school for another 2 years, for any discipline that you're in, with the exception of medicine. They don't let you out of there unless you go there for a decade because you're, you know, saving people
You
or
got
killing people. You know what I mean? It's one
Right.
of the
hey,
it's one or the other. It's like they,
Necessary.
I'm
yeah,
gonna need
right.
you to
They
be in
know.
school as long as it takes.
As
You know,
long as
before you work
as
on
long
me.
as it takes. Yeah, right. And then you
Need
got to
to
work
know
on
that you're
somebody,
okay to go.
and then you still got to learn it, you know, while working on them. So like that's the if that's not an example of how long really it takes. And with The Lady in the
Very
Dale,
long.
I mean, the interesting thing about this is that the filmmaker, Nick Camilleri, who's the co-director, him and Zachary Drucker, you know, Nick was working on this project for 8 years before it showed up to me.
Hmm.
And we worked on it for another year and a half before teaming with Mark and Jay Duplass. And then
Wow.
from there we sold it to HBO, and it took another 2 years before it came out. So I mean, altogether it was a decade to, you know, to 12 years of a process, and look at the results. So yeah, it's sage advice for sure. I would
And,
agree
and
with that.
and I guess like I know Sika got, you know, the question lined up, but like what was like the energy, right? So you say it took 8 years and another year and a half, 2 years and another 2 years. I mean, I feel like, you know, obviously the
Hmm.
times, you know, we still were inching towards it. I mean, you know, Obergefell, which is a Supreme Court case that allowed gay marriage to be, you know, precedent for the entire United States, which was huge,
Hmm.
right? And so you look how far we've come even since, you know, 2015, but then looking at 2020, where 44 transgender Black and Latinx transgender women were still killed, fatally killed,
Right. Right.
in United States. It's like, you know, how big of a moment is this right now for this docu series to come out, knowing the real tragic and horrific history we've had, but also aligning with some of the triumphs for folks that's in that particular you know, specific community.
You
Good
know, I
question.
think, it's a very good question. I think it's a huge triumph. I think it's a huge triumph, not only because of the timeliness of it. I mean, literally the week that we released the first teaser, President Biden had, lifted the restriction of transgender people in the military. And that,
That's right.
you know, I'd be lying if I said I knew that that was happening at the same time. We just got, you
Joking.
know, we just kind of got lucky. But I think more importantly is that it really, you know, Liz Carmichael, who's the central figure of this story, is a fully realized human being. And the story is not actually about her transness and transgender rights and
Hmm.
the sort of fight for it. It's almost like when you think about Black folks, it's like, does every story we need to tell have to be about slavery? Does every story we need
Yeah.
to tell have to be
Yeah.
about civil rights?
The
Do we
trans is
always have to,
normalized here.
yeah, do we always have to shine a light on, you know, our race? We're just, you know, we're people at the end of the day. And I think that this is one of the first examples, um, one of few for sure, but one of the first in which we're seeing a character, a fully realized character, and a fully realized human being, um, regardless of her sexuality, regardless of her gender,
Hmm.
regardless of any of those types of things. We're just telling the story of a
Right.
woman who really, was an entrepreneur in a very male dominated and masculine environment still to this day. And anytime you talk to women who got anywhere close to where Liz Carmichael got, then they can tell you the degrees of harassment. You know, I mean, it's like Me Too is just a word. You talk to so many of these women who had experienced misogyny and chauvinism and all these types of things when it comes to the automotive industry. I mean, like that's the next level. And I think that Liz Carmichael, having really been a standard bearer for how to approach a business in this, being a business person in that industry is really, really a triumph in and of itself. So is a good question, and hopefully I gave you a good answer.
Nah, man, there's no wrong answers unless it's really a wrong answer. Then I'll be like, hold on, man. Because we done had folks on here that we had to give some straightening to. Not a lot of people, but there have been a couple over the last 3 seasons, and I will tell you, Black person no chaser. One thing we don't do, we don't mix our words, we don't mince our words, and so I like to be abundantly clear when we have these conversations, because I think it's important conversations to have. Especially when you got a brother like yourself, man, that seems very knowledgeable about history, which I think is very important as it pertains to film and art. There's no way you can produce something different and be an avant-gardist if you don't know the past. And so,
no, you're the first brother that I've heard that knows the Kurt Flood rule like that. I mean, not were you an athlete? Do you know that from?
I'm a former baseball player, but I wasn't introduced by it. I was actually I was into sports law. I went to law school, man, just so you know. And then I was in Oregon at a sports law institute, learning deeper into the studies of sports
it comes
law,
to light. Yeah, right.
Antitrust law. Yeah. So I'm a little more sophisticated than most, but never follow the conversation.
It's fantastic. I'm glad to hear it. That's a project I might be potentially working on one of these days. So
bro, yeah, I would love to be involved. I would love to be involved. I love your shit.
Yeah, right.
Look it up.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
So before we get out of here, before the last question that we have for you is working and connecting with the legends. I know you've worked with Dick Gregory and you've worked with Spike Lee. Tell us a little bit about those connections.
Yeah, so Spike, in fairness, his film, The Sweet Blood of Jesus, I was really an investor on. And so I had a fairly limited interaction with him as it related to the making of that particular picture. But I did go to NYU, where he was a professor, and talked to him regularly and saw him there as just kind of the building was full of legends, walking around. And he was really kind of at the top of my list. And I remember when I first met him, I bum rushed him at the elevator and introduced myself and said, and I was like, yeah, well, you're trapped in here with me now. You got to talk to me. so a lot of,
all right, brother.
Yeah, no, right. Yeah, it's like, well, I'm in the building, right? I might as well talk to this guy. It's like, I'm not in the building for no reason. But Dick Gregory, though, my relationship was very intimate and very personal. I got really into Dick Gregory in film school, and growing up in the 80s, my contemporary comedian was Bill Cosby. It really wasn't Dick Gregory, the Cosby Show, and then it was like the Cosby Show, which you can watch, and then like Richard Pryor, like which you can't watch. And Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy, right? It's like, oh, can we see Raw? It's like, no, you cannot see Raw.
Oh my God!
Go watch the Cosby Show. And so I knew Dick Gregory from then, from the Bahamian Diet. He made this diet drink. This was at the time when Slim Fast came out, and he had a Slim Slow system called the Bahamian Diet, in which he was going to get all these people healthy and losing all this weight and stuff. And my parents had it, and they had, because they were selling it to people, because he had done like a multi-level marketing thing, and so they had it like in their garage and stuff. And so that's what I connected Dick Gregory to. But then when I was in film school, I started studying him a little more and realizing that he was the predecessor to Cosby and Richard Pryor. That you watch Dick Gregory's stand-up performances, it's like, oh, those guys are doing that. And he came before them, but we didn't hear much about him because he left comedy in the 60s, that predates all of us. So I really got into him there, and I was like, I'm going to do a project, about him or with him at some point in time. And finally had clearing in my schedule, at this point, 6 years ago, 2015, and just made a cold call and said, "Hey, I want to tell your story." And he said, "Let's do it." So we started filming him in 2015, and really up through his death in 2017, became very close with him, became really close with his wife, his whole family. They're friends of mine now. I mean, text them, and talk to them to this day when I'm on the East Coast, see them in DC and Massachusetts and things like that. And he just was, not only developed me as an artist and a storyteller, because this is a man who had the ability to, paint pictures with his words, just sit up on a stage and say something and it paints a picture, but also just as a human being. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
was, he just was a incredible human rights activist. Uh, he gets credit for being a civil rights activist, but his human rights work was
Mm-hmm.
substantial. I mean, not just black folks, but Chicanos and Indians and women, and just marching for one cause after the next, literally sacrificing himself and his body. And it just made a profound effect, had a profound effect on me as a person. And so that film will be coming out at last this year. There's your 6 to 10 year rule. 6 years that project was in the making, and it'll be coming out this year. So,
Congratulations.
yeah.
Congrats on that. What's funny is
Thank
that
you.
just
Yes.
to add an anecdote in there, when we were organizing, and I live out here in DC, and I was starting a bus tour, and I was flying to LA, and lo and behold, I'm pretty sure that Dick Gregory was probably coming from one of your shoots on his
Yeah.
documentary, because it was in 17. We started the bus tour in February of 2017, right
Okay.
around the time they thought the Affordable Care Act was going to get repealed, right?
Abolished.
And
Yep.
so yeah, and so we pretty much, I was on a bus tour for like half the year, touring around the country. And so Dick Greg was on a plane though, going to LA, and I snapped a
Yeah.
photo with him. And it's so crazy. In the fall of that year, going towards the winter, he had passed away, and so I feel connected in some kind of way
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
legacy of Dick
Everyone
Gregory,
did.
and just the whole, the travel plans and everything. It's crazy. So
No, it
it's
is. I
cool.
mean, he was booking shows 2 weeks before he died. I mean,
No, he for real.
yeah, he was headed to Atlanta. He was headed to your part of town, and he was going to Atlanta. He was going to do a show with, I think, Paul Mooney at the time, and so he was ready and willing. And the thing is, though, that he spurred so much. He inspired so many young activists in ways that I don't even think he realized. To really see him
Right.
still at 84 marching. You know, you know, crisscrossing the country on bus tours, these types of things. I mean, he used to say that this is advertising. It's like this is how change happens. We got to do some advertising. You go see a movie, you got to see a billboard. A TV show, you got to see a commercial. This is our commercial to get policy changed. In the White House or in Congress and in your state and local governments and that type of thing. So yeah, I cannot wait for that to hit the market. But that's a project I'm very, very proud to have been a part of.
Dope. That's what's up, man. Congrats on that.
Thank you.
That is our time with you tonight. Is there anything that you want to leave our audience with before we get out of here? We've had a wonderful conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, tune into Lady in the Dale. I got to do a nice little plug for HBO to tune into Lady in the Dale on HBO Sunday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, and also available on HBO Max. And I'm very proud to have been part of that project, and I think you'll enjoy it.
It's gonna be dope. All right. And we are back. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode with Andre Gaines. It was a wonderful discussion about diversity, inclusion, about some legends, Dick Gregory, Spike Lee. That was a fun story. I think Spike would appreciate hearing that story and how he was such a go-getter since back in the day. But yo, thank you so much for enjoying this episode with us. Always coming to break bread with us. We appreciate you guys. And always remember, you can't be caught slipping. So get your full scholarship to Them Hands University. Run over to our merch store. Make sure you get that merch. get yourself situated. Don't get caught slipping. And that's going to be it for today's episode, guys, of the Black Lunch Break, where we think black
And live black.
unapologetically. We out.
Unapologetically. Stop playing.
Really appreciate y'all. This has been one of the most amazing interviews I've ever done. My job as one of the OGs, and my teachers will tell you, my teachers started Duke Ellington, the first class of Duke Ellington in DC. They were revolutionaries. They were street kings and queens. Glenda Dickerson, I got to give homage. Mike Malone, Peggy Cooper Cafridge, Skipper Driscoll, Charles Organs. Well, he's still alive, God bless. Charles Brown, who sang.
What are you listening to? It really actually doesn't matter what you listen to. You need to be listening to Black with No Chaser Radio, clearly. So
Forgot about that.
never forget.
Right.
Never
right.
forget.
My mistake.
Black with No Chaser Radio.